Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session this afternoon on Configuration Manager 2012 and Application Management. Hopefully you're all having a great week this week, and hopefully you're having some fun. You guys want to have some fun in this session? Sorry, room C307, they're having fun there. No fun in here. This is very serious business in here, so no more laughing. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Wally Mead. I'm a senior program manager at the product group. I've been with Microsoft for 19 years, been working with SMS/Configuration Manager for 17 of those years, so been around for a long time and been working with all the different versions again since before 1.0 was called 1.0, so I'll be your guy up in front. So what we want to cover in this presentation is one of the specific features and one of the big driving forces that we think people are going to be looking at moving to the new product, which is application management, or which you guys would know today as software distribution. So yesterday I had a presentation, we went through a technical overview of the product and just talked about the three big pillars. And one of those, the first pillar we talked about was user-centric software delivery, which we'll talk about more in depth in this presentation. And then yesterday afternoon had a presentation on the infrastructure changes as well as some of the deployment technologies and ideas around deploying the product. So we're going to focus in on this specific feature of the product, and then tomorrow, if you're around tomorrow afternoon, have a presentation on migration. So how do you go from where you are today with your product to the new world that we have now? So again, we're going to concentrate on software distribution in Configuration Manager. Basically, I'm going to show you the differences between what you know today in software distribution and where we want you guys to be tomorrow in software distribution. It all ties around what we now call the application model. So I'll do a quick comparison between what you know today, packages, programs, and advertisements, with the application model and how you're going to be moving over to that technology. That user-centric software delivery stuff I talked about yesterday, and we'll talk more about today, it's tied around that second bullet, which is user device affinity. The ability of you designating which computers each user is a primary user of, so that you can associate software with the user and ensure that the software will only install on their primary computer and not install on a computer that's not really their computer. That's user device affinity. We'll talk about global conditions and expressions. That's how you can move away from what you guys do today, which is put all your complex queries in your collections, and a computer falls into a collection if they have this much memory, this much disk space, this operating system, they're in this OU, this WMI property is set this way, this registry value is set this way, then they fall into the collection, they get that advertised software. Well, that's heavy burden on the site server because it's all query-based stuff in collections, and it also relies on hardware inventory or discovery data, which may be out of date. So now we're moving all that to the client end, so it's much more efficient on the server, it's much more up to date, because you don't have to worry about what's been reported to the site server. And that's what we call global conditions and expressions. And then we'll end the presentation talking about two new things we've added in the Beta 2 version of Configuration Manager 2012, which is application uninstalls and application supersedence. And I'll give you a demonstration on those features as well. So here's a highlight of the cool things in software distribution in 2012. All of this stuff on this slide, it all pertains to application model. If you want to live in the old world, which is packages and programs, you get none of this. So this is all new stuff for application model. We still do have packages and programs, as I'll show you, and you can still work with them happily just the way you are today, and you have the exact same features in software distribution as you have today. But if you want to take advantage of all these new cool things, you're moving to the app model. So first thing is, what you guys do today is you create a package. That package has a set of source files, and then you create at least one, if not two, three, four, whatever number of programs for that package. And a program is a command line that says, do this with some files out of this package. And then what you do is you advertise a specific program from that package to a set of members in a collection at a specific date and time. So now what you do instead is you create an application, and the first thing in that bullet list on applications is deployment types. You create a deployment type now. A deployment type is equivalent to what you guys know as a program. Here's a command I want you to run out of these source files. But you don't deploy a deployment type. So you don't advertise a deployment type, which is you picking a specific program to run silent install, attended install, uninstall, whatever it is. So you, the admin, have to make that choice for the user. Instead, you deploy an application, and then we, being configuration manager, determine which deployment type in that application to run on the client based on some other conditions. So it's a lot easier for you. You build your application with appropriate deployment types, and we show you a few different deployment types up there. Most likely, most people will be using MSI, so Windows Installer based, to install an application. AppV, give me a virtual version of an application. If I got a Windows mobile phone, maybe a Windows mobile cab, and some other deployment types we'll have coming up in the future. So you create those, and then based on the conditions and everything else you set, you don't have to figure out which one each individual user gets or which computer gets. You just say, make this application available, and then when the user tries to run it, we figure out how to present that application to the user. Dependency handling. So today there's a couple different ways people do dependencies. You might create your own custom wrapper. So you have your own executable that you run as opposed to running a program, and that executable checks for your specific application, is .NET installed, is IE8 installed, is this runtime DLL or whatever it is installed. So you check things in a custom wrapper, but that's a burden on you. Another thing you might do is the program dependency we have. Go to Program, go to the Advanced tab, run another program first, and then you do that kind of chaining there. Kind of kludgy, it can work, but it's kind of chunky there. Another thing people do is you might run a task sequence. So create a task sequence, install software, install software, install software, install software, and advertise the task sequence. You don't have to do any of that stuff anymore. You now do all that stuff in the application model. I'm going to show you in my demonstration here, I've got a virtual application I'm going to deploy. That virtual application requires the Microsoft AppV client to be installed. So I model or create an application out of the dependent app, in this case AppV client. I make that a dependency for my virtual application. And that deployment type says, I can't run this deployment type unless the AppV client's installed. And then I get to choose, when I create it, whether or not I want to auto-install the AppV client if it's missing, or I want to fail that deployment type. And I can control that. So it's very well handled by the application model now. Requirement rules. So requirement rules are what, again, as mentioned before, you guys are doing today in collections. All those heavy query-based stuff that you're doing in your collections to build your collection membership. You now move away from collections and doing that, put those rules in your application. So I'll show you some requirement rules in a couple apps I've already built for you. Have to have this much memory, have to have this much OS, I have to be, this WMI property has to evaluate to this value. The logged on user has to be associated with the primary device. So I put all that intelligence in my application. So it's not evaluated on the server, it's not based on hardware inventory, the client checks it all real time. Detection methods. We don't want to waste our time. We don't want to waste your network bandwidth. We don't want to waste your DP connectivity if the application's already installed. So before we install an application, we look to see, is it already there? If so, no sense us pulling that content across the wire. No sense us trying to reinstall something that's already there. Your intent as the admin was that ABC application's installed. If it's there, great, you're all done. So no sense having us retry it. The two new things we added are application uninstall and application supersedence. Application uninstall says, I don't want that application out there anymore. I don't care how it got installed, whether it's from ConfigMan, they downloaded it from the web, somebody brought in a floppy disk, if anybody has floppy drives anymore, USB stick, whatever, they installed it. I don't want it there anymore. I model it and I say, get rid of it. And we'll go ahead and do the uninstall for you. End user decides to reinstall it, we're going to go ahead and uninstall it again. So you get to control the uninstall behavior of your applications in Configuration Manager 2012. The other half of that is supersedence. So you have an old version of application, vendor comes out with new version of application, you want to have new version replace old version. So you set up a supersedence relationship. And now we'll replace the old version, IE8, with the new version, IE9. And people will get IE9 unless they have a specific requirement to have IE8. And I'll show you what that looks like. User device affinity, again, tying users to systems. You kind of can do that in ConfigMan 2007 with the asset intelligence and primary console user, but it doesn't really work that well. So this is much, much more efficient, and I'll show you how we go through that process. Unified monitoring experience, you monitor your distribution points, you monitor your application deployment status, your package status, your baseline status, your software update status, all the exact same way in the console. So you can rely on what you're seeing in the console as to what your current compliance is based on state from your client computers. And I'll show you a bunch of demonstrations of that. For the end user, we've replaced run advertise programs. Not many people liked it, we got rid of it. So now we've replaced run advertise programs with two different user interfaces. The bottom one on that list of two is Software Center. Software Center would be the direct replacement for run advertise programs. It's used for system-targeted deployments. So any deployments targeted at a computer will appear in Software Center. Application Catalog is the web-based user interface. So it's a web portal you go to, see a list of all the applications that you have access to based on your login ID and user groups you're a member of. And then you pick the application you want. You can filter, you can sort, you can do queries and so on in there to find the application you're looking for. Select it, and then go ahead and have it launch off and do the install or whatever the appropriate deployment type is as far as running. And I'll show you what both those look like in the presentations. And then as far as content. Content, again, if you're in one of my presentations yesterday, content is any files that you make available to end users, whether it's a package, whether it's an application, whether it's a software update deployment package, whether it's an OS image. That's all considered content. So content distribution is getting files out to distribution points for client access. So we now have DP groups, which we have in the current product, but in the current product, they're static. Once you put a DP in the group, you can deploy software to it. It's a one-time thing. You add a new DP to it. It doesn't know what the group had before. Now they're dynamic state-based. So I add a new DP to an existing DP group. That new DP gets all the software, all the content that was previously targeted to that DP group automatically. Content library, we got rid of that SMS PKG C $share, whatever your $share was. We got rid of that. We now have a content library, which is single instance store. And what that means is if you have the same file that's a member of multiple different pieces of content, it's stored on your distribution point once as single instance store. So you're not copying across the network multiple times. You're not storing it multiple times. It's stored once in your hard drive of the distribution point, and we'll go ahead and every application that refers to it will know exactly where to get that content from. Monitoring experience, I already mentioned that. And then content validation. You can, on demand or as a scheduled task, you can state, I want to validate the content, this package, or whatever the content is valid on all my DPs or on a specific DP. And we'll go out there and we'll check all the hashes and signatures, and we'll report back a status. You're compliant or you're non-compliant. And if you're non-compliant, we'll tell you which file is corrupt on your distribution point, and you can go ahead and do the redistribution process. So scheduled task, or it can be a on-demand task. So those are the high-level features that we'll cover as much as possible in this presentation. I was telling a couple of people earlier, at the Microsoft Management Summit, this was 3 different presentations. So we're taking 3 presentations that were 75 minutes each and cramming into one 75-minute presentation. With me talking now, which expands the scope of how long we go. So here's your quick comparison on what you guys know today and where we are in the future. So what you guys know as a package is now an application. What you guys know as a program is now called a deployment type. So you're replacing packages and programs with deployment applications and deployment types. We still do have packages and programs. And I'll show you that in the console. We leave them there for 2 primary reasons. One is familiarity. We're changing a lot of stuff in this product, and that's one thing that you guys do a lot of, which is software distribution. So while you're going through that learning curve of the new application, you can go ahead and continue to work with packages and programs because you're already familiar with it. And they're exactly the same as you know today. And then secondly is in the migration process. So if you come to my presentation tomorrow, when you migrate an existing 2007 environment over to 2012, packages get migrated over as packages, with one exception, and that is a virtual package in 2007 gets migrated over as a application with a app-v deployment type in 2012, because we don't deploy virtual packages anymore. So we had to do that migration. And we didn't do that in Beta 1, we now do that in Beta 2. Advertisements, we don't have advertisements anymore. You do the same thing, we just now call them deployments. So what you know as an advertisement is a deployment. You guys know optional and mandatory advertisements. Optional is now available and mandatory is now required. So what you guys do is you advertise a program from a package that's required, or it's mandatory, you now deploy an application that's required. You create an available, or an optional advertisement. It's now an available deployment. Same end result, just different technology. Targeting, again, that's your collection rules that were based on the server stuff. Now it's based on client stuff with your requirement rules. End user targeting, we didn't really have it. A little bit with, again, that primary console user from Asset Intelligence. Now we have user device affinity we'll show you. We talked about run advertised programs versus Software Center, and then the application catalog for the web-based experience. And then content management, you put packages on DPs. That's really all you could do. You could redistribute, you could refresh, but that was about it. Now we have very, very rich content libraries, single instance store, health validation automatic on it, state-based groups. You can associate DP groups with collections, so whenever you target the collection, say distribute this software to this collection, it goes to all the DPs in that group that are associated with it automatically. So a lot of cool things there. Okay, here's what the application model, a diagram of it. First off, you're going to create stuff in the admin console, which I'll walk through here momentarily. So you're going to create an application. As part of that, you're going to set up your administrator properties, stuff that you're configuring as part of that application. You're going to create some end user metadata. The end user metadata is what gets published to the application catalog for end users when they browse through that web portal. So they go to the application catalog website, it's going to show them a list of all the apps that are available to them, and they're going to see the end user metadata that you, the admin, publish and create. And I'll show you how to do that. Then you get into your deployment types. The deployment types, and show you the 4 different types on the side right now. AppV, Windows custom script, Windows installer, MSI, mobile cab. And we'll have additional deployment types coming out for like remote desktop services integration and Citrix, XenApp stuff, Nokia. So your deployment type is really the workhorse. Again, that's the program as you guys would know it today. So your deployment type contains requirement rules. This deployment type can be run if memory, disk space, operating system, registry, WMI, IIS, SQL, whatever stuff you're looking for. You can do a whole bunch of different stuff, including custom scripts. Dependencies. Does this application have a dependent application? If so, is that dependent app already installed? If not, am I allowed to install that dependent application? So you can model your dependent applications as well. Detection method. Determining whether or not this application is already installed. If it's already installed, no sense trying to reinstall it. So you get to control that. The install command, that's your program. So what is for MSI, it's MSI exec /I, and then whatever your MSI is. So it's the actual install command line you want to run, or the AppV stuff and so on. And then lastly is your content, which is your actual binaries, those package files that you need to make available to the clients so that they can go ahead and run this appropriate deployment type. Okay, so detection methods, that's determining whether or not the application is already present on the system. It's very, very similar to what we do with software updates, and software update determining whether a software update is already installed or not, same type of technology. Generally, you base that on, if it's a MSI or Windows installer, you're basing on the MSI Windows installer product code. Is that product code already there? Okay, if the application's already there. You can also check registry, file versions, so file-specific properties, create whatever you want to. So we have something called enhanced detection methods to give you wide open. So not only is the application installed based on the MSI, but I also want to look at the registry to see if my corporate registry value is set properly for this application. So maybe somebody just brought in the application that they purchased from home and brought it in and installed it. So the app may physically be there, but it's not considered corporate compliant because it doesn't have your custom template on it, or it doesn't have whatever you have stamped in the registry for it. So it could be deemed installed or not installed depending upon your detection method and how you work with that. So it's discovering whether or not the stuff's already there to determine whether or not we need to pull content across the wire and run a deployment type and actually install some other software. Enhanced detection methods give you much more granular control over determining whether the app's already installed or not. So this is pretty much wide open to anything you want outside of just generally looking at MSI database. So you're wide open here. You can run custom scripts, but most likely people still look at Windows installer. They look at file versions on the hard drive or look at some registry tags that they have. You can also create complex expressions. So you can get as complex as you want to in determining whether or not the app's installed or not. based on your own configurations, the application, custom files, custom registry settings, whatever you need to do. So you can get as simple as you want, the product code's there, or as complex as you want. The product code's there, along with this registry value, along with this file as this specific date and timestamp of this file or file version, or whatever you need. And I'll show you what those look like. Requirement rules, those are the properties that determine whether or not you can run a specific deployment type for that application or not. So again, that's the stuff you're putting today in your collection queries. You have individual rules, as many as you want per deployment type, but they're per deployment type. So you create a rule for your MSI-based deployment type that says only install if primary user equals true. You create a rule for your AppV deployment type that says only install if primary device equals false. And then operating systems and languages and memory and disk space and processor and WMI or registry, whatever you want. They're evaluated on the client, not based on inventory. It's a direct query of that client at that point in time. So it's real-time information evaluated on the client computer to determine which deployment type, because likely you're going to have multiple deployment types per application in a lot of cases, which ones are going to be run. The cool thing is that this is evaluated not just on the client, but prior to downloading anything across the wire. In today's product, you download as soon as you get the advertisement and the user tries to run it, or it's mandatory, the code gets dropped down to your cache, then mandatory time kicks in, and then you try and run the application, or user says run from run advertised program, then we determine whether or not we can install based by trying it, and it fails. But we've already hit the DP, we've already copied the content across the wire, we've already stuffed it in the client cache, all to come back with an error, 1603, or access denied, or whatever it is. Now we do the analysis, do I have a chance at installing this thing or not? If I don't have a chance, no sense pulling anything from the DP. All that's come across the wire at this point in time is a policy. That's it. So very, very small in comparison to your X number gigabyte application that you're trying to pull down. Dependencies. Dependencies, again, are applications that you model that are required for this one specific application. So again, I'll go back to the same story. AppV, a virtual application requires the AppV client to be installed, so you would model the AppV client. And in my case, I'm going to have an AppV client application. It's going to have two deployment types, one for 64-bit, one for 32-bit. Each deployment type is going to have appropriate requirement rules. Install this one on 64-bit OS, install this one on 32-bit OS. I could also do I could also do processor, I could also do memory, I could also do disk space, whatever I want to. And that is my dependent application for my virtual version of the application I want to make available. So that's my dependency. So you model your dependent applications as actual applications, and then you set up the dependency relationship. Very, very easy to do, and I'll show you how easy that is. So as many dependencies as you want, and we do the analysis for you. You don't have to do program chaining like you do currently. So it's this dependency and this dependency, or two different versions of an application, a dependent application, .NET 3.5 or .NET 4.0 type stuff, whatever you want. The important thing here is you have to model these dependencies as an application in the application model. So I'll show you what that looks like. Oh, I guess I'm going to do that right now. Okay, press the right button. There we go. All righty, so first thing I'll show you is that for the most part, in terms of software distribution, your site system roles are exactly the same as you know today, which is basically a site server, a database, management point, and distribution point. Still need all those same things for doing software distribution. The one place that really changes is if you want to use the application catalog. If you want to use the application catalog, then you have to install a couple of roles called the application catalog web service point and application catalog web site point. These are the two site system roles that clients interact with from the application catalog. And so I've gone ahead and pre-installed those. They're very, very simple to install. You just tell us what port and what protocol you want to use, and that's it. And what server you want to run these roles. So I've got that installed already just to save us some time, because I knew it was going to be running long for me. And then you go in there and start creating the content you want to deploy. So first off, I'm sitting here on packages. It should be showing me the one package I pre-created for you, just to show you. I'm not going to deploy the package, but just to show you that we still have packages. So here's a package. It's called Microsoft Mass. It's got 6 programs. What I did is I imported an MSI, just like you would do today, create package from definition, and we had that same wizard up here, create package from definition, and I browsed to the MSI, And when I did that, it created these 6 programs, the exact same 6 programs that we created today in ConfigMan 2007. So we had the exact same stuff. We just don't say, we just show you the whole command line here that you don't normally see without going into the program itself. And same type of disk space requirements and so on. So we still have them. You still deploy them the exact same way. You just say deploy as opposed to advertise. So we still have those. You can do them, use them exactly the same way you have. Okay, but we're working with the application model. So I've already pre-created a few apps, and I'll go through what these apps are coming up a little bit later. The only one I've deployed so far right now, you can see, is DCM Tools. It has 1 deployment on it. And if I go down to here's my statistics. It says I've targeted 1 distribution point that's installed, which really means the content's been, oops, I should be doing the Zoom It thing so you guys can see better. Sorry about that. I'm not a big user of Zoom It, so I'll probably forget like 95% of the time. Every once in a while I'll remember, and you'll get shocked because things will blow up on you. The good way, not blow up as in bad stuff. And I did go ahead, this one has 1 deployment type. And you can see that 1 deployment type is based on MSI technology. So it's an MSI or Windows installer based deployment type for this application. And then it has 1 deployment. And it says it's deploying to the Collection Configuration Manager clients. It's an application. Here's when I created it. It's required, which you guys know is mandatory. So it's a mandatory application. And it's 100% compliant. In other words, it's been installed on all my targeted computers in that collection. So I did that just to set up the uninstall, the superseding stuff later on. Okay, but we're going to go ahead and create a brand new application. So we'll do create application. Notice there also is an option here for import. And there's also an option over here for export. We allow you now to create applications in your lab environment, because we all know you guys have a pristine lab environment that mirrors production very well, and that you always go to your lab environment and do your modeling and testing there first before you move to production, right? And if I ask you to raise your hand if you don't do that first, I think that's an indication of who's going to be generating resumes pretty soon, or not coming back next year. So this allows you to go to your lab environment, model your application there, test it out, export it from lab into XML, import it into your production environment without having to remodel everything, and just do your deployment in production. So very, very cool. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and here's our deployment types. Let me go ahead and. So Windows Installer, AppV, Windows Mobile, and the Nokia stuff. It doesn't work in Beta 2, but that will be for the Nokia client when we've got that all working. So kind of ignore Nokia right now, but it will be there. We're hoping that we'll have it all fixed and ready to roll for RTM of the product. But as of right now, it's Windows Installer, AppV, and Windows Mobile. So we're going to go ahead with a Windows Installer application. You browse. You cannot do local drive. Must be a UNC path for an application. So applications do not support local path like your packages and programs still do. And we'll go to Lab Files, and I'm going to go ahead and create that same application that we created the package out of, which is Microsoft Math. So what I did is I browsed to an MSI. We imported some information from that MSI, which we show you up here, basically the product code and so on. So we imported a little bit of information from the MSI. We then let you customize that, so I can go ahead and change my administrator information. So Math for Microsoft, it's version 4.0. And I'm just going to leave everything else default. There's the command line that's going to go ahead and run by default with this 1. It doesn't import and create 6 programs like a program does, a package does. It's going to create 1 deployment type. I can create others if I wish to. And it shows me what I'm going to do. That all looks good. I'll click Next, let it create my application. And then I'll go in there and we'll start modifying that application to provide the end user metadata that we want to do. And then we can create additional deployment types. We can create our requirement rules. We can verify our detection methods, create our dependencies, whatever else we need to go ahead and create for this application to be available for our users. So our application's all ready. It appears in the console. It says we have 1 deployment type. That's all we create is 1 deployment type on whatever the technology that was, in this case MSI. No deployments and no references is not referred to by any other application. So we're going to go ahead and go to the properties of this application. And I won't spend the time to go through every one of the tabs here, but the first tab you have is the Catalog tab. The Catalog tab, this is the end user metadata. So this is what's going to appear in the application catalog when an end user goes and browses in the application catalog. So I want to put in end user friendly information here. So it's whatever you want to have. Languages, by default, we're, in this case, English, United States. However, we have quite an extensive list of languages. There we are, still in the A's. So it's basically every language known to man, or at least that they have computers, and we have support for. The localized application name. Categories. Categories are what you can create for filtering your applications. We filter by category, we filter by publisher. And publisher by default right now is Microsoft, the way I put it. And I've created a category called tools. I can either select and go in that same category, or I can create an additional category. And I'll just use the tools category I created. End user documentation. So this would be a website, internal or external. Let me move the mouse so I can read what I'm typing. That you want to point users to if they need more information about this application. So maybe you have an intranet where you point users to get information about applications that are available to them. You can point them there. The link text, ignore that for now. In beta 2, we ignore that, so you might as well ignore it. We're trying to figure out if we're going to strip it out and just use the default click here for the link, or if we're going to allow you to type it in like it is now and then actually use it, which we don't. You can type all you want, we just don't use it. So if you want to save yourself typing, just ignore it for now, and then we'll figure out if we're going to use it or just remove it. A graphical calculator. Keywords, these are the searching words in the search bar. I'll just say file copy. If you have custom icons you want to get, you can go ahead and browse to a default library, or you can go to custom icons if you have like an app V version of the application, something like that. You can browse to whatever you want to for your icons. I'll go ahead and take this one. I don't have one for Microsoft Math, so I'll go ahead and take that. Okay, so that's the end user metadata we're going to go ahead and publish. Then we have deployment types. So deployment types, this is the one deployment type that got created for us automatically by browsing to that MSI. The deployment type, the important things are, here's your program, the command line you're going to run, MSI exec/i/q in the file. Here's your uninstall command. The uninstall string is important if you want to deploy an uninstall action. So if you want to uninstall the application, we have to know how to do so. So you have to make sure you supply an uninstall command line. And we pulled this from the MSI when we imported it. And here's the product code we would look for. Detection method. So our detection method by default is just looking is the product code installed. But I go ahead and add a clause to say not only is the product key there, I want to go ahead and look at registry, Windows installer, or file system. Or I can go ahead and get more complex by creating my own custom script stuff and browsing to my own script and doing whatever I want to with my detection method. I'm just going to go ahead and use the default Windows product code. Requirements. This is where I put the rules in here. Right now there's no requirement rules here. So this guy's available to anybody I deploy it to, as you guys would know as an advertisement. But here's where I can go in there and say, okay, I want to say this is only available for a device that has one of these attributes. So here's the built-in attributes, or what we call global conditions. So here's the built-in global conditions for a device, and I can go ahead and pick and choose any of these. Okay, if I just go with the default of total physical memory, and then equals, greater than, less than, is between. You have between values, between 1 gig and 2 gig. So you can put that in there if you want to. And I'll say it has to have 1 gigabyte of RAM to run Microsoft Math. And I can put in as many requirement rules as I want to here. Now I'll show you something which you can also do later on, which is I can build a custom expression which is saved as a single rule, which I can then reuse later on. So maybe I have a standard corporate desktop where everything is always this processor, this memory, this operating system, this much free disk space. And instead of adding those 4 rules every time, I create an expression with those 4 rules and what my conditions are. And then my requirement rule would be standard corporate desktop equals true. And if it matches those 4 rules or whatever is in standard corporate desktop, then it evaluates the true and it passed the requirement check. And then return codes, I can go in here and add in custom return codes. So maybe your application doesn't return with a 0 for success. So maybe it returns with a 1 for success. So I could add a custom return code in here of 1 for success, so I know to treat that as a success response to that application. So that's all we'll do. And then dependencies. I'm not going to have a dependency for this one. Just keep this one simple, but I'll show you one later on with the dependency. So that's all I'm going to do for this guy. I'll click OK. If I wanted to add another deployment type, I would just click Add. And now I can do another Windows installer. So this was an unattended install. Now I want to do an attended install. So I could browse to that same MSI, change my command line, get rid of the /q, and then have that. Or I can now go to app V, or I can go to the other deployment types we have. And I'll just keep it nice and simple here.
For applications that are 64-bit or 32-bit, is the model that you made those two different deployment types in one application, or are those two different applications?
Okay, so the question was if you have 64-bit, 32-bit applications, what you would do there, is it one app or is it two apps? You could do it either way. You could have one app with a 64-bit deployment type and a 32-bit deployment type. Or you could have two separate applications and just target them uniquely with the separate requirement rules. To keep the console clean, I would probably create one application with two different deployment types, such as I have done. Click OK, and then there we go, with the Microsoft App V desktop client. On this one, I've modeled the application. That application has two deployment types, one for x64 and one for x86. And then each of these deployment types has appropriate requirement rules, which says here's the operating system, 32-bit or 64-bit, that this can run on. So that's probably the way you'd want to go with it, but you could certainly create two different applications. Okay, so I created my application. So that's all the harder it is. Now, obviously, different deployment types will ask you different things that you'll be working with. But that's really what, in essence, what an application is and how hard it is to create. Once you've created an application, then you go ahead and deploy it. And I don't think my slides allow me to deploy yet. I think I'm supposed to wait before I do my deployment. If I want to try and follow my demo for once this week. Yeah, I guess I'll follow my demo. Yes?
Piggybacking his question, in a situation where you had either 32-bit or 64-bit app packaged in the same package, would and the client was 32-bit, would it also, if you did a download and execute, would it download the 64-bit MSI as well, or would it only download the 32-bit download quickly?
It will down the appropriate files that it needs, so the individual files that are necessary for that content. So it would only download, in this case, the 32-bit deployment type, the content for that.
64-bit MSI would stay on the DP.
Correct. Well, it's going to stay there regardless, because remove it. But I know what you mean, yes. Yeah, so if you create your own custom script, then it's your return code from your script that will determine whether or not you're detected as to presence or not. Right? Okay, so we're back up on slides. Okay, so content distribution. I've created my application, which again, I've also created that program, that package and program. I've not put this content yet on a DP. So let's talk about doing that, and then we'll go ahead and do good deployments. So DP groups, again, they're intelligent state-based things in Configuration Manager 2012 where they weren't in 2007. So you can link them to collections to, as they say, optimize the workflow, which means whenever I say deploy to this collection, it automatically gets all the DPs and the DP group that's associated with that collection. So it helps streamline. So instead of saying advertise or deploy here and then put the content in this DP group, you can do it all in one command. And as I mentioned before, if I add a new DP to that DP group, it gets all the content that was previously distributed to that distribution point group. So we have that association, that state-based technology there. So we have a new wizard for distributing content. I'll show you what that wizard looks like. It allows you to say distribute to a DP and individually select my DPs, a DP group and select my DP groups, or a collection, and then it will go to all the DPs and the DP group that's associated with that collection. Again, it's if you have dependent applications, which I do have in my example here I'll deploy later on, when I deploy my virtual application that has a dependency on the Microsoft App V client application we just saw, it's going to automatically distribute all dependent applications as well. So when I distribute my app, if it's got a dependency, it distributes the dependencies as well, including the next bullet, task sequences. When I deploy a task sequence, it automatically deploys all packages or pieces of software associated in that or referenced by that task sequence. We don't do that today, and a lot of times your task sequence fails because you forgot to put the boot image out there, or you forgot to put some other package out on your distribution point. We do that for you all automatically now. Content library, again, you guys are not going to be able to, or let me put it this way, you guys are going to be safer in your 2012 product than you are in 2007. Because what happens with you guys today is that some admin wants to troubleshoot something, so they go to your distribution point, they go to your SMSPKG $share, they find the ABC0017E4 package, and they go ahead and copy a new version of a file over, and they wind up screwing something up. And then you have to go and redistribute the whole thing over and over again. But it's very easy for you as an admin or some other lower level admin who's goofed up stuff, you guys I know would never goof anything up, to goof up your content. Now it's really hard because it's very hard for you to find the files you're looking for in that content library. I'll show you what it looks like if I remember to, or you guys remind me when I get my next demo. But it's a listing of files that you don't see the file name, you don't see the extension of the file. It's all mapped internally through files in our database and stuff on the distribution point. So it's very hard for you to find the files you're looking for, to go ahead and make minor modifications to those files, customize a file, or replace a file. So you do everything now through the console. So your DP should be more secure than they ever have been in the past, because it's very hard to go in there and find the files you're looking for, to not intentionally goof them up, but it winds up being that way. But again, single instance store, so the file's only there once on a DP. Bandwidth control. Distribution points have bandwidth control on them. So we now have the exact same capabilities with a remote distribution point that you have with a secondary site in today's product, in that you have 24/7 scheduling and bandwidth controls on an hourly basis. So I can state from my site server to my remote DP from Atlanta to Charlotte, I only want to deploy software or distribute content from 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. and only if the content is listed as high priority. And then from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m., I'll take any content available. And when I do distribute content, I only want to use 10% of the bandwidth for Configuration Manager. And we'll do that analysis, and we'll adhere to whatever desires you put on that. You have none of those controls at all today with Configuration Manager 2007 to get content from a site server to a DP. It's all immediate, over the wire, 100% of the bandwidth. We're going to go ahead and use it, and no throttling, no scheduling. The scheduling is once admin clicks OK. That's when your schedule happens. But now you have that full capabilities on that with your bandwidth, throttling, and scheduling distribution points. And if you haven't heard yet, if you weren't in my other sessions, branch DPs go away. There are no more branch DPs in ConfigMan 2012. A standard DP can work on a workstation. Windows 7 box, just like a branch DP could work today. Here's a screenshot of what content monitoring looks like in the UI. I'll show you this coming up momentarily. But it's you go to the monitoring workspace, sitting down here in the workspaces or Wonderbar. You click the monitoring one, go to distribution status, content status. It shows you all the content that's been created in your environment. Shows you how many distribution points are targeted, what type of content it is, what your size is, and what your compliance state is for that content on your targeted distribution points. In this case, we're 50% compliant, 1 success, and 1 in progress right now. So it's a single spot you go. There's no longer a package status underneath each package. There's no longer a package status underneath system status. You now go to the monitoring node, you go to distribution status, go to content status, and that's where you find the status of all your content. Now remember, I did show you that what was a DCM tools, and it did say distributed on 1 distribution point, or installed, it said. So you can see it there, but that's after the fact stuff. This is what your current status is. That's all summarized information later on. And I'll show you this as we get into distributing our application here momentarily. Okay, so now you got your content on your distribution points, or point. The last thing you do is to make this content available, the application available, is a deployment. And again, deployment is what you guys know as an advertisement. So same stuff, we just changed the name on it. You create your deployment once you've created your application, put the content on the distribution point, then you go ahead and create your deployment. You can actually put the content on the DP as part of your deployment process. I'll show you both those if I remember in my wizard when I go through the demos. Show you both different ways of doing so. 2 types of deployment purposes. Required is what you guys know as mandatory. So a mandatory advertisement is now a required deployment. And then optional advertisements are now available deployments. So an application is now either required or available. Required means it has some deadline where it's got to be run. Available means there's never a deadline. It's at the end user's option whether or not they go ahead and deploy that or try and run that application. If it's a required deployment, you retrieve policies either on schedule or on demand, and then it'll go ahead and kick off at the appropriate mandatory time or required time. If it's an available deployment, and the target is a system collection, then you see that deployment in Software Center. If it's an available deployment targeted to users, you see that deployment in Application Catalog. So user-targeted, available, Software Center. Or excuse me, Software Catalog or Application Catalog. We're in the process of changing the terminology. So the Application Catalog, the web portal. If it's system-targeted, you see that in Software Center. So very much like what run advertised programs would look like today. And I'll show you both those. Two types of actions. When you create a deployment, you're either doing an install or you're doing an uninstall. So those are your two actions. So I create a deployment. I either create it as a required or available, install or uninstall.
Well, the required to users, that's still going to show up in your...
Required to users does not show up in Software Catalog because, in fact, it's required. It will go ahead and deploy at the appropriate time. There's an option you'll see when we go through the wizard here, a pre-deployment. What pre-deployment allows you to do is to, with user device affinity set, it allows you to allow us to pre-deploy the content to the client's cache prior to them invoking the action in Software Center, or excuse me, in the Application Catalog. So it's available application in software and in the Application Catalog. We'll go ahead and if you set the pre-deployment option on there, we'll pre-download the content prior to the end user clicking the install button from Application Catalog to save you that download time. So very much like it was a requirement or a mandatory you guys know today where we download the content before the time, this is kind of like doing that for available and user-targeted software. Okay, deployment monitoring, it's all state-based, so no more status messages for software distribution of applications. We still use status messages for response on package program deployments. But for application model, it's all state-based. So the same stuff as software updates as DCM is what you know today, or what we're now calling compliance and settings management. If state changes, we'll go ahead and update the state. So your state, you don't have all the different various status messages in the database. You have the last compliant state. Your state is required, my state is compliant, my state is requirements not met, and so on. And here's error and unknown, as well as in progress. And we'll show you that in the console. So in the console, you'll see what that monitoring state is. And I'll show you what those look like as we go through our demo. So now we've got our deployment done. So now I'm going to go ahead and select my application to install. So here's what the flow looks like. So I create my application. I put my content on the DP. I create my deployment. And either the end user has gone to the application catalog and selected the software or the application, clicked install. I've gone to Software Center for a system-targeted available application, clicked install, or I've hit the deadline, so the mandatory time. Requirements met. So first thing, I run all those rules. Do I have a chance at installing or running this deployment type successfully? If I don't meet those requirement rules, then we fail the application. So we stop. No sense even doing anything else because we know we can't install because the requirement rules don't meet. If the requirements are met, then is the application already installed? So run through the detection method, either the basic one or the enhanced detection method. So I run through that. Is it already installed? Yes. Okay, then I stop. And we report back compliance because the application is there and that's what your intent was, that it was installed. If the application is not installed, we proceed on. Dependencies. Are there any dependencies? And if so, are they installed? If they're not installed and you allow us to install the dependent applications, install them. If they're not installed and you don't select the option and it defaults to auto install, and if you clear that option so it doesn't auto install the dependencies, then you get a failure, an error on your application deployment. If you install them or they're already installed, then you go ahead and it says install application, but really it's run deployment type. It may not be an installation, just depends on what you're deploying, but in essence, you generally think about that as installing your application. So everything in the yellow column on the big thing on the left, all that happens before you download any content across the wire. All you've downloaded across the wire at this point in time is a policy. And then once you get to the point of either installing dependencies or installing your application, that's where you're actually pulling content from the distribution point and doing your work. So the nice thing is you're going to save a lot of network traffic, you're going to save a lot of disk space for those error conditions that have no chance at working at all with the requirements. So you'll weed all those out and save all that. And you get back state saying, as we said, oops, I got to go back to every single one of these now. Maybe I shouldn't do that. You get the second bullet down, 5 categories of state, the last one on the list, requirements not met. You would get back a requirements not met if any of those requirements could not be satisfied. So the question is, will it tell you which requirement is not met? And the answer is yes. It will show you what requirement was not met. Alrighty, so we've got our application created, Microsoft Math. We've not deployed it yet. Let's go ahead and put the content on the DP. So let's go to the Distribute Content Wizard. And it shows me here's the application or the content I selected. It tells me by default I'm going to look for associated or dependent applications, any dependent content. And so it will give me a listing of all the content that I have to distribute based on dependencies. And I don't have any, so it's just this one application. And now I can go ahead and deploy to a collection and all DPs associated with the group of that collection association, a single DP or multiple, and then distribution point groups. So if I were to go to collections, I have a collection association here. I guess I should have shown you this. I think I put this one on there, I hope. And then it tells me I'm going to go to this one collection right there, this one piece of content. And provided I set up my collection association correctly, back over here, go distribution point groups. Here's my one group. And if I do show members, it's got that one DP in the group. And so that's where the content's going to go. And if I go to collections, configuration manager clients. So what should be happening now is if I go down to my monitoring workspace and then click content status, here's all the content I have. You can see whether it's an application, a boot image, a package, whether it's been targeted to however many DPs, the size of the content, and my current compliance status. And Microsoft Math is in progress. So it's in progress right now, and when I refresh, it's going to be done. It's only 8.3 megabytes, so it is done now. So it's on my DP. I can view status, so I can click the link down here or back up on the ribbon. We have view status, and I can go see the status for that content. It'll show me success, and if I had in progress or whatever errors or whatever, I'd have different tabs here. It'll show me the individual DP and what the status is of that content. So just like in 2007, you don't bother creating your advertisement until the content's on a DP. I know a lot of times you do, and just make sure that it's on DPs before the client retrieves policies. That's fine as well. But that's one way of deploying your content, and I'll show you a different way later on. Okay, I got my content out there. So now I want to take Mass, and I want to go ahead and deploy it. So as you guys would know, advertise. So I click the deploy action on the ribbon. And notice that for distribution point, it's already filled in because it went through the previous process. I'm going to deploy to users, so it appears in the software catalog. So I'll go all users. And notice we show you how many users or members of each collection. So I think you guys have heard me say it before. So no longer can your dumb admin say, I didn't know there were 10,000 computers in that collection, because we're going to show you exactly how many computers are in each collection. Now, they may not look at it. They may just blindly pick the collection, but at least it was there in front of them. So they have seen it. Now, again, whether or not they understand what we're showing them, I can't force that. But we know we have some dumb admins out there. None of you guys. So no offense intended. Click Next. Now, my actions, install or uninstall. So I want to do an install. My purpose, available or required. I want this to appear in the application catalog, so I'll make this an available application. If it's available to end users, I can say require admin approval, which I'm going to go ahead and select so I can show you that workflow. Very minor workflow, but we'll go ahead and select that. And I'll show you what that does. Scheduling, because it's available, there's no deadline, so just when is this available? And the default is it's available right now. So at 11:23 a.m. On today, which my computer is in Redmond time, so Pacific time, so it's available. I can set that to be in the future if I want to. If this was required, then it had the mandatory time as well. When is it required to be installed on the client? But it's available, so we'll leave that. User experience, hide all notifications, probably not a good idea for user-based software. You want them to be able to see stuff. Alerts. We allow you with the applications to generate alerts. Alert me if my compliance is not at some SLA after some period of time. So I'd select a checkbox here, and probably 1% is a little low. So you probably might want to put something like, let me know if my compliance is not at least 75% after this date and time. And the default is 1 week in the future. So you give a week for deployment, and then after that week time frame, if you're not at least 75%, we're going to generate an alert in the console. And it doesn't email you, it doesn't page you, doesn't buzz your seat, your chair you're sitting on to let you know something's gone wrong. It's just an in-console thing. If you go look at the application management node right above where we are in the wizard, it'll pop up with an alert at the bottom of that page. You can also select down here to integrate with Microsoft Operations Manager to go into maintenance mode. So stop monitoring, because I might be stopping services, I might be restarting computers, and so on. So you don't have Mom or Ops Manager generating a bunch of alerts there. And it's supposed to work now. Wasn't us. We used the API that we were told to use from the OpsMan team, so not our fault they gave us the wrong one. You can also have an alert if your failure percentage is above a specific amount. So maybe you don't care as much as how soon you get to 75% compliance. Maybe you're more concerned about the failures. Let me know when I've got at least 5% failures on my deployment. Hey, snacks are out there already. That's not fair. And I can't be eating while talking. It's not a pretty picture. So I thought you were going out for something important, like a phone call. Going out to get some food. Okay. All right. No more questions for you. There you go. If it would have been a nice, big, nice, warm chocolate chip cookie, you would have got my personal business card. Anyway, so we're I don't know why this guy's sitting here. It's supposed to be popping up with all of our details, including in the details, it's going to tell me the collection I'm targeted and how many computers or users are in that target collection. So a second time, John Doe admin is seeing how many users or how many systems they're targeting when it does appear. I don't know why it's not appearing. It may just be... No, yes, it is beta 2, no doubt. There. See, there it popped up as soon as I click something else. There popped up, member count for all users 6. So again, I may not read it, but at least it was there. And then I go ahead and it shows me all the other properties for my deployment. I click next, and guess what? On the completion page, we show you the same thing. So again, third time we're showing you how many members that you're targeting with this deployment. So click close. I've got my deployment. So basically creating a policy like you guys know today. I go back to the monitoring workspace, and there's no more, let me go back over here where I was. There's no more software distribution homepage that shows you all your top 10 advertisements based on targeted systems for the last week. You don't have that anymore. Instead, we now go to the monitoring node, but before I go there, application management. If I had an alert generated, it'd be sitting right here. The alert would be sitting right here. It said recent alerts 1. It actually did have one earlier. I'll show you that in a second. But I go to my monitoring workspace, and I go to deployments. This shows you all my deployments. Here's DCM tools, which I deployed earlier, 100% compliant, two assets. And then here's my current deployment, which is Microsoft Mass. I have no status because I don't know anything at all. So I would do a right click and run summarization. That looks at all the state information that I have received so far from this deployment, which is going to be 0 because I did not retrieve any policies from anybody, unless a user happens to have done that already, which in my case not. And then I would go ahead and do a refresh. And I'm still 0% compliant, but it shows me unknown is 6. It knows that there's 6 assets in my target collection. Okay, and the last thing I'll show you before we move on is go up to alerts. So here you see my alert for DCM tools. It says canceled. It had raised an alert because I set an alert to say, let me know if I'm not 90% compliance after 5 minutes. And I only retrieve policies on my one client. And that generated the alert. Hey, I'm only 50% compliance, which is below your threshold of 90%. So it raised the alert. I retrieve policies on the second client. And then, obviously, I'm 100% compliant now. And so the alert gets canceled automatically. So very cool. And I have one that's closed right now. I have one configured, but it's not been turned on. It hasn't been activated yet because I've not done any summarization for that. All right. So that's as far as I'm supposed to go with this demo. We have tons of reports. Beta 2 comes with 411 reports. So we have a ton of reports. Yeah, I'm not showing you any reports. Reports are all SRS based, so you have to know SRS. If you don't know SRS, you might want to start getting familiar with SRS, because that's how you're doing reporting in ConfigMan 2012. And we have, they're right here in the right here in the monitoring node. You go to reporting, and you click on reports, and then you go look at the path as to all your software distribution, your deployment type reports. But you have all the same reports that are all SRS based now. So yes, you can do the same thing in reporting that you're doing in console. Our goal is that in console gives you all the basic information you need, and you use the reports for the troubleshooting or the more detailed information that you need to give to management. So show them something. Okay, so I made this deployment available targeted users, which means it's going to appear in the application catalog. So the application catalog is for user-targeted available software. So you can browse, you can search, you filter there, and I'll show you that. We're going to go ahead and install some content, an application. And then I configured it for requiring approval. So I'll show you what that workflow looks like as well when we get there in a moment. We also have the application or software center, and I'll show you that. So here's what the flow looks like for available user-targeted software, the application catalog. So way down in the lower right is your client, and that's the user, Melissa. Here's the website, the application catalog website, and here's the site server. So the user launches the application catalog, shows you a list of all the applications that are targeted to you or user groups you're a member of. User picks an application they want to run. That's Melissa picked an application, in this case, Microsoft Math. The website then goes and gathers information about your client computer. It goes down and queries your client computer for information, sends that back up over to the site server. The site server then builds a policy on the fly for that client. So it finds a client ID, creates a policy for that client, sends it back down through the website down to that application catalog. So now that policy includes the detection methods, the requirement rules, the dependencies, everything about that application. So previous to that, all they had is just a list of what's available. So the policy gets brought down, Melissa tries to install, clicks the install button on that application, and then we go through requirement rules, the detection methods, the dependencies, and hopefully everything works fine. If so, then we go ahead and send state message back up saying, yes, I'm compliant now with this application. Even though it wasn't required on me, but I'm compliant with it, I did successfully run that application. So let me show you what that looks like live. I will switch over to my client computer. My site server is a client computer, but as well. So two different things I'll show you. One is, let me go, don't like this resolution, Software Center. So let me show you Software Center. So Software Center is for system-targeted applications. So this, again, is what replaces run advertised programs. You can see that I installed DCM Tools earlier. So DCM Tools was installed earlier. I don't have an uninstall action here. So I don't have uninstall action because it's a required application. I can't uninstall through our stuff a required application. I could go to add remove programs and uninstall it, but we're going to go ahead and reinstall it again because it's state-based. So we're going to reanalyze every week by default what the status is, and the status says this is a required application. Ooh, it's not there. I need to reinstall it. So anyway, that's what that looks like. I'm going to leave that running here for a moment. And then here's our application catalog. I pre-loaded it for you. Nothing by default. It shows you in the upper right your logged on user ID. So I'm logged on as Config Manager DOM Administrator, so it shows you who you are. Lower left, you can customize an application name. So I just typed in TechEd conference site. So when I create my application catalog website, I get to specify that. And so I went ahead and put that in. It shows you there's no applications available at this point in time. So I don't have to go retrieve policies. I just go ahead and do a refresh of my catalog. And that goes and contacts the website to see what applications are available. And now you see Microsoft Mass. There's that custom icon I gave it. Looks like a stop button or shutdown. Here I see categories. Just in the tools category, it's the only one I created. Here's publisher, so I can filter by publisher, and the only one I have right now is Microsoft, but it would then switch my applications over. Here's my search bar, so if I type in something like PDF, I'm looking for a PDF application. I don't have any, but I typed in, what did I type in? This is a math, a calculator. Type in calc, then it will show me my application. I get a little more information about the application here. This is a hyperlink, so I click the link, and it shows me basic information about the application. Here's the click here. So if I had access to the internet, it would take me to the, I typed in www.microsoft.com, it would take me there, and I don't have, so. Now this case, look at the application. It doesn't have an install button, it says request. This is that application that requires administrator approval. So I click request, it pops up with a form. I need this for my tech ed demo. And I click submit. I can then go to track my software requests. I see my software request is there. It's been requested at this date and time. So I can see what the status is. I now switch over to my site server. I switch over to the admin console, which happens to be on my site server. I go back to the software library. I go back to the approval requests. And there it is. There's my request for Microsoft Maths. I can go ahead and look at the properties of it. And it says it came from this user, administrator. And here's their text. I need this for my tech ed demo. And then I either do an approve or deny, whatever I feel is appropriate for this user. So I'll go ahead and click approve. Okie dokie. Hope it works. I know I'm typing it wrong, but that's all right. I don't type very well. I would blame it on the keyboard, but it's my laptop, so I can't. It's just me, I can't type. So, okay, so that immediately then goes back into the application catalog. So I switch over to my client, and then all I do is a refresh, and now it says approved. So my request has been approved. So before you guys ask, I know the next question is, does this integrate with Service Manager? Yes, it can. We don't out of the box. You can take our SDK and you can integrate with Service Manager or any other workflow engine you want to give you a more complex workflow. Email notifications or pages or whatever else you want, or chargebacks or whatever. And no, we don't, out of the box. Can you customize the application catalog? If I would not have been a tech ed, I would have been able to answer that question for you. Because that was a question my MVPs asked today, and we had a conference call with them earlier today, which I was not able to attend, and that question was being answered. So his question is, can you customize the application catalog? As far as I know, yes. The SDK will allow you to customize the catalog, but I don't know to what extent. So I don't know if we're going to allow you to change the labels here or the form that appears and so on. I don't know that level of detail yet. So once I get the recording from that, I'll listen to it and find out the answer, or I'll just email Dave, who was answering the question for us. So anyway, I'm back here. My application was approved. I click my application, and now it shows install as opposed to request. So I click install. It says, are you sure? And I say, yes, absolutely. I'm sure I know what I'm doing. Retrieving computer information. Evaluating requirements. It's going through my requirement rules to see if I meet the requirements, the detection methods, the dependencies. And then what should happen here, oops. That's not good. It should not be gray like that. Oh, okay. Okay. I thought maybe my disk space filled up. It happens in VMs. In downloading, installing software. But if I go back to Software Center real quick, you see the process. It would have said downloading if I would have got there sooner. We show you the results of a user-targeted software in Software Center on the client. So you can see that it did get downloaded and installed. Here's my dialog. Here's my icon on the system tray. Notice that I do have the uninstall action here. So I can uninstall this because it was optional. It was available. So I can go ahead and uninstall it from our code now, not from the software catalog or application catalog, but from this portal. We also do pop up a message to the end user saying, hey, from the catalog, you successfully installed this application. You can now use it. And I just realized that's why it gets so dark in here, because this is a black background. Okay. I kept wondering, what's my eyes going bad or something? It got darker in here. Look at how much lighter it gets. Maybe just me looking here at the screen. So that will go back into the into our console here through monitoring when we get to the status, the state message being reported in. And by default, state messages go every 15 minutes. I changed mine to be every 2 minutes. So sometime within the next 2 minutes, I'll get that state message back saying I'm successfully deployed this application now. And then so we'll look at that momentarily. I've got 5.5 minutes left to finish up my 35 minutes of presentation left. So we're going to fly. No, it's not that bad. So I'll just let this, as we say in the computer biz, I'll let this cook for a moment, and then we'll come back here. So multiple deployment types, I'll show you that. I think I already showed you that with the AppV client package, had multiple deployment types, but I'll show you another one coming up. It allows you to just create an application with multiple deployment types, and then we figure out how you want to deploy that. We figure out which best type of installation to run based on your rules. Why are people walking out? I still got time. You guys are missing all the good stuff. Okay, that's all right. I'll save the answers to the final exam till the end. So you can create as many deployment types as you want. You can have as many MSI-based deployment types. Like you have 6 programs in a package that are all MSI-based. You can create those same 6 programs here as different deployment types for the same application. Traditionally, you would think of it MSI and then an AppV, which is what I'm going to show you here. Like right now, I'm going to show you that. So let's go look real quick and see if we got our state message back that said we're compliant. We'll go back over to our deployments node. We'll take Microsoft Maths. We'll do a summarization. Run summarization. Doodle-doo-doo-doo. Give that a moment to process. And then we do a refresh. And now we're 16.7% compliant. One of my 6 users has successfully installed that application. Now if I go look at view status, it'll show me the success for this user and on what client they ran it on. So I can see all the individual assets that this individual user went ahead and ran that application on, which would be important if I get time to demonstrate something else. And here's all my unknowns. So I have 5 other users that are unknown. They've not tried to run that application yet. Okay, so I was going to show you multiple deployment types. All right, so an application. So I've got another application here called Rich Copy. Rich Copy is an application. I'm going to go ahead and show you the properties of it. It's got 2 different deployment types. One MSI-based and one AppV-based. So I'll show you these real quick because I'm going to wind up not having enough time to go through all the slides. You guys can get the slides later on and download and look at them on your own and understand them all really well. So the AppV one only has one requirement rule, which is for operating system, and I said it runs on Windows XP SP3, which I have not here, but 32-bit client, and Windows 7 client, which I have, and my site server operating system. So that's the only one for the rich copy, but I might put a requirement rule in there that says only if primary device equals false. For the local install one, however, I'll go ahead and look at the requirement rules, and I have pre-disk space is at least 100 megabytes, primary device equals true, and I've got a custom expression, standard desktop equals true. And here all I can see is the custom expression is what it evaluates to. If I want to see the individual rules that I have, I then go to global conditions. Any custom thing you create gets saved as a global condition that you can reuse later on for other deployment types in other applications. So you don't have to redo your work. And so I created a custom expression called standard desktop. If I go look at its properties, that one actually has 3 different clauses in it. One says a WMI property, system manufacturer, has to equal American Megatrends Inc. And physical memory has to be at least a gigabyte, and the operating system has to be a specific OS. If I want to see what system manufacturer, that's a custom expression, is a custom clause. I can go here and show you what that looks like. Standard manufacturer, I created this. And this is a WMI property. Look at this WMI, WQL as we call it here. Root SIMV2, Win32_BIOS, manufacturer. So I'm saying this WMI property has to set to American Megatrends Inc. period before that clause would evaluate as true, for that expression then would be true as a requirement rule. So that's what multiple deployment types get you. I got a minute and a half. No way are we going to be close. Applications, yeah, they're great. UDA, you want to associate users with computers. And task sequences, we want you guys not to use task sequences for anything other than OS deployment anymore. Let us do the application deployment. Yes, you can. We actually have added a install application task sequence action. So you can install an application that'll do the deployment types, the requirement rules, dependencies for system-targeted systems, which an OSD deployment would be. We'll do that. But we want you doing all of the software installations through our normal process, which is the application model. User device affinity is how you tie users to computers. I'm going to kick over and show you that real quick and do my last little deployment, and then we're going to run out of time. I got 40 seconds. So what do we want to go do first? User device affinity, go to assets and compliance. You have to discover users first, and I've discovered users. One of the ways of setting UDA is going to the user and then right-click and say Edit Primary Devices. And this lets me pick all the clients that this user is the primary user of. If I'm not sure what it is, I can type in part of it, and then we'll search and we'll show you everything that matches the criteria. So that's one way, is by the administrator forcing it on the user. Another way is going to your device, like Client 1, and then I can say Edit Primary Users. So let me set the users on the computer as opposed to the computers for the user. And here you can see I administratively established this one. This is based on usage. This user has logged into this computer in the last 90 days. So we track that, thinking that might be a primary user. So you can go ahead and set that if you want to. You could also go to here, and you can do a Manage Affinity Relationship Requests. So we track based on usage how often a user logs on based on the time there, and determine whether or not we think that should be the primary user. You can approve or deny that request as well. Okay, with that, I'm bright red. They're going to kick me out of here. They're going to kick you guys out of here first before they kick me out of here. So what I guess I have to tell you is that I didn't finish. I apologize. You guys asked too many questions. It's your own fault. It's him as Snacks distracting me is what it was. So he apologizes dramatically for me not being able to finish my demos for you guys. I had this lab. This is actually a lab downstairs in the hands-on lab room. If you go down there, it's advanced software distribution. You'll create this exact same scenario with Rich Copy. And what should happen if I deploy this, and when I'm logged on as administrator, I'm not the primary user, it would run the virtual version of Rich Copy. You then log off and log on as user 1, which I just showed you the association. It would then do the install of Rich Copy through an MSI, because I am then the primary console user. So that's available downstairs. Didn't get to supersede and uninstall, but it's there in the product. So play around with it. So.